Hi, I'm Mark Tyrrell of Uncommon Knowledge and hypnosisdownloads.com, and welcome to Do You Have an Inferiority Complex? How to Spot and Overcome an Inferiority Complex. While one person hesitates because he feels inferior, another is busy making mistakes and becoming superior. Henry C. Link said those words. Most of us compare ourselves to others. Mass media beams in the finest looking, richest and most talented people into our lives 24/7. Okay, maybe not always the most talented people, but this creates the illusion that we know in some way all these beautiful, clever, younger, athletic, rich, able people, but of course we don't really know them. They are an extreme that can come to seem the norm. Because we compare ourselves to people we know, this illusion of knowing airbrushed have-it-alls can make us feel correspondingly worse about ourselves. Which reminds me of Eleanor Roosevelt, which I'll come back to. The trouble is, we may compare ourselves unfavorably to all people around us, and especially the ones in the media. Okay. As Eleanor Roosevelt said, no one can make us feel inferior without our permission. So here I want to talk specifically about how we feel compared to other people and how you feel compared to other people. An inferiority complex is a general feeling of not being up to the mark in some way. Now, I want to distinguish between knowing and feeling. Okay, there's a difference. I know I'm inferior to Bill Gates financially. I know that I'm inferior to Stephen Hawking when he was alive intellectually. I know that I'm inferior to millions of men aesthetically. But this knowledge doesn't bother me one iota. Okay, so that's knowing that doesn't have a feeling effect on me. Knowing you're inferior in some ways is very different from feeling inferior generally. Knowledge that you might sometimes compare unfavorably to others may just be insight and perception, but you don't have to really bring your feelings into it that much. It's crazy to try to pretend that we're all as good as each other in all ways. The self-esteem industry has been guilty of this ridiculous artifice. Okay, I know that I'm inferior at sprinting to Usain Bolt. It doesn't bother me. An inferiority complex is not the same as confidently accepting that others have the edge on you in some or certain areas. True destructive feelings of inferiority happen even when we might objectively be better than others in some ways, but we still feel worse than them. For example, I worked with a man who got the best degree in his class at Cambridge University, yet still felt academically inferior to his fellow students. The way he felt about himself was a total misrepresentation of the reality. So why do people suffer from an inferiority complex? So if we look at the anatomy of this state of mind, confidently knowing that Usain Bolt can run faster than you is not the same as feeling inferior. True inferiority complex has us feeling we should be as good as other people, firstly, that we're not as good as others, but we don't really know why that is. So it's a generalized feeling of inadequacy, not based on rational judgments. It's just a feeling of not being as good as other people. In a world in which we're on the one hand encouraged to buy stuff because we're worth it, whilst simultaneously being force-fed airbrushed perfection, it's easy for someone with a pre-existing inferiority complex to feel worse. Our environment is kind of set up for that. It might be you were repeatedly told you weren't good enough by a parent or a significant caregiver. One woman I know was repeatedly told by her mother she was the ugliest girl in the street and no one liked her. Now that kind of explicit putting down is hopefully quite rare, but sometimes we get the message, if you like, in more implied kinds of ways. Some people were constantly compared to other people. Well, why can't you be more like your sister? Why can't you be more like your brother or someone else or your friends? And that kind of thing. Other people feel inferior because they are perfectionists and feel that anything less than perfection is disastrous and completely inadequate. But of course, there are degrees of adequacy. Whatever the reason for inferiority complex, here are a few ideas that might well help you. So first, get specific. As I said, we can know we're inferior in some ways, and that can be fine and not bother us at all. If you find yourself feeling inferior, ask yourself, okay, exactly who do I feel inferior to and why? Narrow it down, even write it down. Emotional thinking is always sloppy. It's always all or nothing. So tighten it up and make it less emotional. There are close to 7 billion people on this planet, last time I counted. So what kind of person do you feel inferior to? Rich people? Good-looking people? Very academic people? People you view as accomplished? Most people aren't these things to an extreme degree. Okay? Now, get even more specific. Name names to yourself. So, okay, actually, I feel inferior to Bob down the street. Why? How specifically is Bob better than you, or Sally down the street, or whoever it is? So from feeling inferior, we've gone to feeling inferior to specific types, then feeling inferior to specific people. Bob down the street or Sally down the street. Now ask yourself, in what ways Bob isn't superior to you? Does he have your humility, or wit, or life experience? If we're too narrow with what constitutes good or successful, then we're more likely to come off feeling worse. Believe me, Bob has issues of his own. 2. Drop the mime. No one has written on his or her tombstone, "Here lies Ralph. He was quite like Bob." All Ralph can be is Ralph, or the best possible version of Ralph that Ralph can be. He ain't ever going to be Bob. Wanting to be someone else is okay-ish when you're 15, but how can an impersonator ever be true to themselves and become truly fulfilled? Being inspired by someone else means assimilating some of their traits into who you are. It doesn't mean trying to have their exact same life. Inferiority complexes thrive on people wanting to be someone they're not, and that is a losing game. It's never going to work. This doesn't mean we have to limit ourselves as to what we can do, but it does mean that we can get by much better when we don't try to be someone else. 3. Dare to be different. Life is much less restrictive now in westernized countries than at any time in history. In the 1950s, you were expected to be married, perhaps in your early 20s, to have children and have a respectable career, to have short hair or longer hair, depending on gender, to dress properly and have all the right opinions. We haven't cast aside all these norms, and I'm not suggesting they're all bad, but people are much freer now to live a bit differently, to choose their own path. No one is a failure if they're unmarried at 40 or 80, or if they don't have children or a traditionally professional career. Not in terms of current societal norms, though your parents may still have these kind of retrospective expectations which may have influenced you. But the kind of thinking that prompts, oh no, I'm 45 now and I should have got myself a mortgage, a partner, 2.4 children, I should be like how other people are, is a trap if that's not really for you. If you really want these things, that's one thing, but if you only feel they're expected of you, then remember that your life is your life, and it can only be lived by you. 4. What would make you feel as good as others? Recall that in Hans Christian Andersen's tale, The Ugly Duckling, the young swan felt a failure as a duckling because, well, it wasn't really a duckling, was it? It was something other than a duckling. So of course it was going to feel a failure as a duckling, because that's not what it was. How could it be successful at something that it wasn't? If you feel inferior, imagine for a moment how you'd need to be to not feel inferior. What would you need to look like? To own? What would you need to be doing? And now reflect, would all of that really be you? Or would it be like a swan trying to be a duck? 5. Beware of utopian thinking. People who feel inferior tend to think in all or nothing ways. Any emotion will drive us to think in black or white, all or nothing, absolutist, extremist ways. Utopianism is a type of this simplified emotional thinking. It's a kind of if-only thought. If only my nose was straighter, then I'd be confident and happy. If only I earned 10,000 more a year, then my life would be good. If only I could be exactly the same as Bob down the street, then I'd feel great. Life doesn't work like that. Because much of what we feel inferior about is relatively superficial, the non-superficial part of us will always feel left wanting by external band-aid remedies. Sure, you might have more confidence with a straighter nose for a while, but you're much more likely to forget about comparing yourself to others, either favorably or unfavorably, when you live your life in a sustainable way that utilizes your real core character strengths, values, and personal ideas. As the explorer and translator Sir Richard Burton wrote, "Do what thy manhood bids thee do, from none but self expect applause. He noblest lives and noblest dies, who makes and keeps his self-made laws." So I hope you found that useful, and if you did, please hit like and subscribe, and if you want to hear when my next video is published, hit the notification bell below. I'm Mark Tyrrell of Uncommon Knowledge and hypnosisdownloads.com, and if you'd like to try some of my personal development products, head over to hypnosisdownloads.com and take a look around. And thanks for watching.